Acts chapter 17. This chapter is broken down into three sections. As Paul goes to different cities, we get to see how he interacts with the people from each of those cities. Paul and those traveling with him passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia. They came to Thessalonica. A Jewish synagogue was there. Paul went into the synagogue as he usually did. For 3 Sabbath days in a row, he talked with the Jews about the Scriptures. He explained and proved that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. "This Jesus I am telling you about is the Messiah," he said. His words won over some of the Jews. They joined Paul and Silas. A large number of Greeks who worshipped God joined them too. So did quite a few important women. But other Jews were jealous, so they rounded up some evil people from the marketplace. Forming a crowd, they started all kinds of trouble in the city. The Jews rushed to Jason's house. They were looking for Paul and Silas. They wanted to bring them out to the crowd, but they couldn't find them, so they dragged Jason and some other believers to the city officials. "These men have caused trouble all over the world," they shouted. "Now they have come here. Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all disobeying Caesar's commands. They say there is another king. He is called Jesus." When the crowd and the city officials heard this, they became very upset. They made Jason and the others give them money. The officials did this to make sure they would return to the court. Then they let Jason and the others go.
Did Jason return?
Yes. It's like a bail money. Jason actually took the house arrest on behalf of Paul. He kind of took Paul's place so that way Paul would be able to carry on and the attention would be on him. It just meant that he wouldn't be allowed to leave the city and that he'd have to go to court. But when he goes to the court, he should be able to recover some of his money. As soon as it was night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. When they arrived, they went to the Jewish synagogue. The Berean Jews were very glad to receive Paul's message. They studied the Scriptures carefully every day. They wanted to see if what Paul said was true. So they were more noble than the Thessalonian Jews. Because of this, many of the Berean Jews believed. A number of important Greek women also became believers, and so did many Greek men. But the Jews in Thessalonica found out that Paul was preaching God's word in Berea. So some of them went there too. They stirred up the crowds and got them all worked up. Right away, the believers sent Paul to the coast, but Silas and Timothy stayed in Berea. The believers who went with Paul took him to Athens. Then they returned with orders that Silas and Timothy were supposed to join him as soon as they could. So the first place they went to, Thessalonica, some believed, some didn't, and then you got a lot of the Jews who did not believe. They wanted to kind of take Paul out. They didn't like what Paul was saying. It's interesting that they didn't like Paul so much that when they heard he went to another city, they dropped what they were doing and went to the city just to mess with Paul. It's like they have nothing better to do, than to go on and mess with him. I also like how it says about the Berean Jews, they questioned things. They didn't just readily believe whatever Paul said. They went back to the Word, they questioned what he said, and they actually found out that Paul was telling the truth. And because of this, their faith was stronger than that of the Thessalonican Jews. Paul was waiting for Silas and Timothy in Athens. He was very upset to see that the city was full of statues of gods. So he went to the synagogue. In Athens, it was a huge city, one of the big cities of the time, and they had all the different types of gods, all the different temples, because everyone believed in the various gods. They were polytheistic. There he talked both with Jews and with Greeks who worshipped God. Each day he spoke with anyone who happened to be in the marketplace. A group of Epicurean and Stoic thinkers began to argue with him. Some of them asked, "What is this fellow chattering about?" Others said, "He seems to be telling us about gods we've never heard of." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus. He was telling them that Jesus had risen from the dead.
What are the Epicurean and Stoic thinkers?
Yep. Epicurean and Stoic are two philosophies that are kind of opposite of each other. Epicurean philosophy is very similar to eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. It's very much live in the flesh. Flesh is all that really matters. Stoic looks at it the other way and says we need to live in the spirit. We need to be focusing on the eternal things to the detriment, to a large extent, of the flesh. So you can't do anything fun. You can't enjoy food, nothing like that. Christians were actually in the middle. We are spirit, and we do believe that the spiritual world is real and is vital. It's incredibly important. But God's also made us physical. So we don't deny food, shelter, the basics, and we actually use that in order to reach out to people. We help people who are poor, who are hungry. So we really do focus on both as Christians. They took him to a meeting of the Areopagus. There they said to him, "What is this new teaching you're giving us? You have some strange ideas we've never heard before. We would like to know what they mean." All the people of Athens spent their time talking about and listening to the latest ideas. People from other lands who lived there did the same.
What's it, Areopagus?
Areopagus was their court of justice. It was their council. There weren't a lot of people on there, and it was high prestige. So it was kind of their counterpart to, like, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. Then Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus. He said, "People of Athens, I see that you are very religious in every way. As I walked around, I looked carefully at the things you worship. I even found an altar with 'To an unknown God' written on it. So you don't know what you are worshiping. Now I'm going to tell you about this unknown God." Paul is very smart. These people are polytheistic. They worship so many different gods. They have statues of all the different gods, that they even have a statue to an unknown God, and for them it's just, in case we happen to miss one, here's a statue for the unknown God, because they don't want to miss one. So they're being superstitious. But Paul takes their superstition and actually turns it around. He says, "What I'm bringing you is nothing new. You already have it a little bit, because you're already worshiping an unknown God. So I'm not presenting to you a new God. I'm presenting to you your own unknown God." He's tying into their own culture, their own belief. He says, "He is the God who made the world. He also made everything in it. He is the Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't live in temples built by human hands. He is not served by human hands. He doesn't need anything. Instead, he himself gives life and breath to all people. He also gives them everything else they have. From one man, he made all the people of the world. Now they live all over the earth. He decided exactly when they should live, and he decided exactly where they should live. God did this so that people would seek him, and perhaps they would reach out for him and find him. They would find him even though he is not far from any of us. In him we live and move and exist. As some of your own poets have also said, we are his children." So he's using the poets of their own time, tying back into their culture. "Yes, we are God's children. So we shouldn't think that God is made out of gold or silver or stone. He isn't a statue, planned and made by clever people. In the past, God didn't judge people for what they didn't know. But now he commands all people everywhere to turn away from their sins. He has set a day when he will judge the world fairly. He has appointed a man to be its judge. God has proved this to everyone by raising that man from the dead." They heard Paul talk about the dead being raised. Some of them made fun of this idea, but others said, "We want to hear you speak about this again." So Paul left that meeting of the Areopagus. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed in Jesus. Dionysius was one of them. He was a member of the Areopagus. A woman named Damaris also became a believer, and so did some others.
Why does it only mention the two names?
Well, a lot of people believed, but it mentioned these two specifically because they were people of prominence. So Damaris was very likely a powerful woman, enough that by saying her name, people knew who she was. And he also mentioned Dionysus because he was a member of the Areopagus. And as we said, that's a high-level court of justice for them. So the fact that these two people heard Paul's message and believed, they were probably respected within the community. By saying their names, people know who they can go to if they have any questions. Well, that's it for our commentary on Acts chapter 17.